We'll call the special voting session to order on Tuesday, February 11th, 2020 at 7:01 p.m. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Horn?
Present.
Mr. Bateman?
Present.
Mr. Leith?
Present.
Mr. Welch?
Present.
Mr. Parrott?
Present.
Mr. Downs?
Present.
Mr. Keller?
Present.
Mr. Haneke?
Present.
Is there anyone that would like to speak under public participation relating to the health insurance topic? Okay, let's have a discussion first. Would anyone like to comment? Beth?
Well, Peggy and I, city clerk and I, have been working on this, and today at 2 o'clock I said to her, why don't we go down the line and compare what the three unions want? Now, the non-union employees unfortunately haven't had a say in this, but we've listened to them, but they haven't had the kind of say as a union has. But we've got pretty much everyone is on the same page, and we'll go down the line real quick, but it looks like just at the last minute, we got something in from the street department. That's correct, Peggy? That said that they wanted to go retro back to January 1st of 2020. So let's go back here with the HSA, the FOP that was on the table for the street and for the fire departments, unions to go through was that they were going to go with a HSA 2,800 deductible and the 5,000 plan that was a given that we already had said that we would go with. And this was all going to start March 1st, 2020. And then they would go with, we would add $100 to each individual who was on the HSA plan. And the fire department had been on 110 normally. They would go up to 215. And we could say with the non-unions, they would go up as all. So across the board, everyone would have $215 a month given to them, contributed by the city to help with their HSA, to help with the high deductible. And then all of that should be finished. Oh, and then the PPO and the HMO that we had already approved on March 1st on December 16th, 2019, would stay the way it was. And there would be an amendment to each of the contracts to reflect this, if that's what the council wants to put in, either an amendment or a letter, some kind of sort, what do you have to put into the contracts, each of the contracts. And the fire department has to have it go back to 1,500 according to their contracts. So that's why they want to go till December 31st, 2020, and then it will revert back to the $1,500 deductible after that, starting January 1st of 2021. But it will be finished because insurance is year to year, calendar year. This will have to go back to 12/31/2020. So from March 1st to 2020 till 12/31/2020, 10 months. And this is what the three unions came up with. They agreed to this. You want me to read it again, or?
Ron?
Thank you, Mayor. So there was several different HSA plans, am I correct? And so the city's contribution to be increased up to 215 is regardless of which HSA plan they had, am I correct?
The one that the three unions chose was the $2,800 deductible that was originally voted for March 1st. They agreed to stick with that vote, and in turn, the city increased all HSA contributions to $215 a month
Okay, right. Thank you.
for this till the end of 12/31 of 2020.
So if the council would approve this, then we would need an amendment to the contract, to each of the contracts, their Article 22 insurance.
Did you say, Beth, that they wanted it retroactive to what date?
The street department asked to be retroactive back to 1/1 of 2020. And we had talked about that, but the other two unions have not put that in there. So I don't know, council wants to go back 2 more months for each of those, or if we want to drop that off and just make it March 1st, goes up to 215, and we go forward. I don't know if anyone's from the street department's here tonight. I see from the...
Tracy, you have comment?
Yeah, I think, because I sat in on the negotiations, the follow-up conversations with streets and fire with Beth and Peggy and the mayor. So Beth did a good job of explaining it. A couple other things I want to add. By the time you calculate in the reduction of the premium, because the current rate under the $1,500, $942, the new rate under the plans that we've already approved for March 1st is $803. So they're going to see $139 monthly savings in less premium payments. So each individual across the board is going to see roughly $1,390 in savings over a 10-month period. With the HSA, as Beth said, one of the tricky parts about this has been that each union and the non-union has different amounts. So the goal has been to get everybody to a consistent position so that future negotiations are much easier. We'd like to actually see the language in the contracts be verbatim, if we could. So it's easier for the committees to then focus on the broker and focus on the plans rather than all of the other stuff that we got kind of muddied up in here. So, as she said, there is a increase, especially for the non-unions, but there's not that many non-union employees. If we bring everybody up to the 215, Peggy and I figured it up that day. It's only an additional $550 that we would be contributing by giving them this increase. The big savings here, though, ironically, is that if we were to go with the HSA POS alternate 2 plan, which would have been a $1,500 deductible, if you remember, that's what they wanted initially when we had our open meeting, that would be roughly $87,000 increase to the city. The HSA approach only results in a $55,000 increase. So going this way and bumping their HSAs up with the $2,800 deductible saves the city actually $32,000 in this process. And then it gets us to a consistent state. And then they also would like, the unions would like to begin talks within 30 days of us approving any amendments. So they don't want to wait till the last minute. They want to get going immediately on it. So I think everybody involved's done a good job of trying to get to some common ground here. But the council, I would recommend that the council at 12/31 revert the amendments. They would just expire on 12/31. And then the committee would then focus on 2021 under the original language. So, and I believe with the HSA being where it's at, that also positions them to have different types of discussions next year.
Steve?
So who brought up reverting back to at 12/31, the original language? Why even do that?
I believe it was fire, wasn't it?
Was it fire of the street?
I think it was fire because fire has a $1,500 deductible
Yes, they
set
did.
in the language of their contract. And I can only speculate that they don't want us to lock in a $2,800 deductible because, as you know, things go up and rarely go down. So if we revert back to $1,500, that helps prevent future inflation for them.
Would that only be then for fire?
No, in my opinion, no. I think all 3 unions need to be on the same page.
Beth?
Just for insurance purposes, they should be. I mean, maybe all the way around, but, you know, you've got to give your union their individuality. But, yeah, I think
Well-
for this reason,
And the other part that I think is important here is that we have non-union employees who aren't afforded the same HSA amounts because they haven't had a union negotiating for them. This at least puts them on the same level as the union employees. A side product of having a committee, I think, an advisory committee, and a good one.
Any questions or discussion? Do we have a motion of some sort? Oh.
I would make a motion to approve I would make a motion that an amendment be drafted by the city attorney that reflects the discussion that we've had here tonight, and that the current The previously approved insurance plans continue to go into effect March 1st. With the increase, the $2,800 deductible and the $215 HSA.
For all active people with HSA.
Yes, excluding retirees.
Second. Mr. Hoblet?
So just for clarification, for this general vote that you guys are about to conduct, you need me to create an ordinance that essentially reflects everything that you're voting on tonight, or just the amendment?
Items we said, we can give you that information.
Okay, so just verify, Tracy made the motion, Jeff seconded. Jeff?
I would maybe reach out to some of the union, either presidents or their representatives from out of town. And maybe it's just as simple as doing a memorandum of understanding between the two and not actually opening the contract and redoing an article or something where the memorandum of understanding supersedes what the section of the contract says. It might just be as simple as that.
Yeah, I think that's what they meant when they were talking about amendments. Because we were very clear that to open up the contract for this short of a period of time would not be wise from a time perspective either. And they agreed. At least the ones I sat in on did.
Mr. Hoblet?
I would concur that a memorandum of understanding would probably be more appropriate in this particular scenario. I've done those before, and that for these short-term situations. So essentially, you're not going in and changing in contractual terms. You're leaving it. This would make it cleaner, so to speak, for a 1-year deviation.
Beth?
Thank you. I just was wondering if, we've got Nancy Schaub, who was one of the brokers from R.W. Garrett that did the insurance this year. She's done a great job, her whole team has. And I didn't know if you had anything you wanted to say about this. Are we conveying what you think is exactly right with all this? Okay. Do you have anything else you want to say?
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Honeggy?
Yes.
Mrs. Horn?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Due to a conflict, I abstain.
Mr. Leith?
Due to my lack of previous involvement on this topic, I abstain.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Parrott?
Yes.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
Mr. Keller made the motion. Mr. Welch seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, special voting session is adjourned at 7:14 p.m.